60 Minutes Rewind.
Will the next president be inaugurated at noon on Wednesday? That's an unthinkable question. The Constitution demands it. But on the other hand, the law also required Congress to count the electoral votes January 6th, which the attack on the Capitol delayed. This week, Washington is an armed camp. With a president impeached for inciting insurrection, tens of thousands of troops are en route to the Capitol to join thousands of police officers and federal agents, all preparing to uphold their oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies. Will Joe Biden be inaugurated at noon on January 20th?
Absolutely. This nation will have its 46th president. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take the oath of office right here in Washington, D.C. on January the 20th.
In our city,
Muriel Bowser is the Democratic mayor of Washington. She took us to the ground, trampled by the mob, to show us a Capitol and tradition restored.
You see the balconies there, and that is where the next president will take the oath of office. You see the red drapes just behind the podium. That's where the president and special guest will enter.
Ritual is returning after the greatest attack on the Capitol in 206 years. In the aftermath of January 6th, Mayor Bowser asked the federal government to reassess security. They're adding reinforcements and imposing a larger, earlier lockdown around the White House, Capitol, and National Mall. This exclusion zone of 7-foot fences and military roadblocks was rushed in 6 days sooner than planned.
What we know is that not only is the inauguration itself a target for these extremists who stormed these Capitol steps and put 535 members of Congress and the transition of power for our country in danger. We know that they're planning events leading up to it. So it's very important that we have a posture that discourage people from coming, all people, but also discourage these extremist groups from thinking they could come back.
Earlier plans called for 10,000 National Guard troops. Now, 25,000 are being deployed. More troops in Washington than in wars overseas. Their gear includes shields for COVID and combat. Many of the troops are being mustered in the corridors of the Capitol itself, as they were in 1861 during the Civil War.
I was also very heartened to see the Joint Chiefs of Staff issue a statement that the United States Army would be there to support the mission of a smooth transition of power.
It's a hell of a thing for the Pentagon to feel like it has to issue a statement that it is supporting the Constitution.
It is, but it is necessary, and I'm glad that it happened. But we as Americans have to stop thinking that we can take for granted that every American has pledged his allegiance to the Constitution. What we saw in plain view were too many Americans who had pledged allegiance to Donald Trump.
The military has taken the decision to give combat weapons to the National Guardsmen who will be providing security for the inauguration. Are you glad about that, or are you worried about it?
It's a place in our history that I'm sad that we've come to. American troops should not have to be armed against their fellow Americans. But what we saw was an unprecedented attack on our democracy and the cradle of that democracy.
The Secret Service is in charge of what the government calls a National Special Security Event, a designation for high-risk gatherings, for example, the Super Bowl after 9/11, and political conventions.
The Secret Service leads it, but there are available to them 10 to 20,000 security personnel.
Ken Cuccinelli is acting Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees the Secret Service. He told us inauguration security planning has been going on 8 months. On social media, the terrorists seem to see the attack on the Capitol as a win. And I wonder if you're picking up intelligence that they're emboldened by that.
There is a lot more online chatter, if you will, that has come up since January 6th. But I would point out that a lot of that chatter isn't nation's capital focused. It's more general across the country.
Has the suspect who planted 2 pipe bombs during the attack on the Capitol been caught?
As you and I sit here speaking, the answer to that is no.
So you have him to worry about?
Of course, yes.
Is TSA intercepting known suspects before they get on planes for Washington?
If they identify an individual like you described, they will, first of all, keep that person from flying, and if there's a legal basis to do so, they will seize and hold that person for delivery to the FBI or local authorities.
The local authority in Washington is the Metropolitan Police. On January 6th, the MPD helped rescue the Capitol Police and break the siege.
Everyone is working very hard to ensure that that never happens again.
We met Acting Chief Robert Conte in his command center, which, on Inauguration Day, will be filled with representatives of the FBI, Secret Service, and Defense Department. While the world is focused on the podium at the Capitol, Conte will still have to cover his city of more than 700,000 people. Chief, what will the MPD have deployed on Inauguration Day?
Every available resource, that's our entire department. Our total department will be activated. We'll have support of law enforcement officers from all across our country to the tune of about 2,500 that will be here to support us in this effort.
You've been with the MPD for 31 years. Is this the tightest security you've ever seen in Washington?
The tightest security that I've ever seen, absolutely.
But the tight security faces unprecedented chaos at the top. Both the Attorney General and Director of Homeland Security recently resigned. The Defense Secretary was recently fired. Even Homeland Security Deputy Secretary Ken Cuccinelli is a stand-in. He was never confirmed by the Senate. DHS has had 6 secretaries in 4 years. Why should the American people have confidence in federal law enforcement when the leadership is not in place?
Because the professionals we have in law enforcement, in the federal government, in the Secret Service, and across the Department of Homeland Security and beyond, DOJ and all the rest that we work with, are lifelong career professionals. That's 99.9% of the people creating and executing the plans to ensure the safety of incoming President-elect Biden, and none of them are going anywhere.
We will never give up. We will never concede.
But there's also the dilemma that the security is commanded by President Trump, who encouraged the attack on the Capitol and has relentlessly worked to stop the inauguration of Joe Biden. Who does the National Guard answer to?
They answered through DOD. They can have...
To the president.
That's the chain of command.
If he orders them to stand down, will they stand down?
Well, you're going to have to ask them, but that's unimaginable.
If the president orders DHS to stand down, will you stand down?
We're going to complete our jobs. There's not a stand down. We have a statutory mission. We're going to perform under all circumstances, and I think that hypothetical is not going to happen. It's unimaginable.
A lot of things are unimaginable in Washington these days, and we don't have a very good track record
Well, in the Department of
taking
Homeland
the president's
Security,
word on things.
In the Department of Homeland Security, we're in the
point
habit.
is, are you going to follow the
we're in
president or are you going to follow the Constitution
We all
in your
swore
role now?
We all swore an oath to the Constitution. That is first and foremost. And we take Homeland Security very, very seriously. We deal with a lot of curveballs of all kinds, and yet we march forward to keep the American people as safe as we possibly can.
We must go forward. We must make it as safe as possible, but we must go forward.
Much of what happens in Washington after Inauguration Day is in the hands of Democrat Chuck Schumer of New York, who will be the new majority leader in the Senate. He's making plans for the trial of President Trump after last week's impeachment. Why put Donald Trump on trial when he'll be out of office anyway?
What Donald Trump did is the most despicable action any president has ever taken. And he should be convicted at this trial. In addition, if we convict him, we can then, by only 51 votes, remove him from ever running for office again. I know we want to heal, but when something this awful happens, to just push it off will not heal.
To convict him, you need a supermajority, which means 17 Republicans would have to vote to convict. Doesn't seem likely.
I just believe that our Republican colleagues, when they look at this, will see how awful this was, what it means in history, and join us in convicting him.
How soon would you like the trial to begin? Do you feel that it's important to get part of President-elect Biden's agenda completed in the Senate first?
We have the trial of the president. That's mandated by law. Second, there's a very, very real need for President Biden to have in place key people in his cabinet, the people in charge of national security, the people in charge of domestic security, the people in charge of making sure everyone gets vaccinated as quickly as possible. And third, this country is in the greatest economic crisis since the Depression, the greatest healthcare crisis since the Spanish pandemic flew 100 years ago, and we must pass more relief for the American people. We must do all three, and we have to do them all quickly. One cannot stand in the way of the other.
The story will continue after this.
On Wednesday, President Trump will not be on the podium, the first president to snub his successor's inauguration in 152 years. Also not attending will be the usual inauguration multitude on the National Mall. The 2-mile-long park is closed. Invited guests, members of Congress, family, and dignitaries will be socially distanced on the stage and in the few chairs on the Capitol grounds. Mayor Muriel Bowser is telling the general public not to come to her city. She's even asked the Interior Department to revoke permits it already issued to demonstrators.
For a couple of reasons. For the security of the event, and let's keep in mind what we just saw here 1 week ago. People stormed these steps and put our democracy in danger. But we're also concerned about people traveling and gathering and celebrating in big groups because of COVID.
What is the best guarantee that you can make to the American people?
I know for sure that the United States Secret Service that is responsible for the security of the President of the United States, if they thought this couldn't be a secure event, they wouldn't let it happen.
But security comes at a cost to a ritual celebration. Constitution Avenue, the spine of federal Washington, is vacant for miles, from the Lincoln Memorial to the White House, past the Washington Monument, and to the Capitol. The military cordon has the feel of some other country, one with a tenuous grasp on the rule of law. Halfway up the avenue, the Constitution itself has been locked out of sight in the National Archives to protect the parchment for future reference.